take a moment to locate ourselves in place. I am on the traditional homelands of the Chumash people in a canyon that is very special. And I have a new mic set up, so hopefully the wind, I forgot the little mic hat that buffers the wind. Hopefully it's not screaming at you. It feels so good. And I'm just tuning into my relationship with my feet, into the earth, the surface. What kind of surface is this? I'm standing on rock. And I'm paying attention to different sounds, the sound of the wind, the water moving through spiraling, rounded rocks, asymmetry, and the asymmetry of the light dancing across my closed eyelids. And the ants biting me in different places. And so today I want to talk about walking, which there's so much that we could say about walking. And I've been thinking about walking for a while. My research is in part informed by Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen's work and a workshop that I just did, an Access Syllabus workshop, and some of the things that Nuria Boart was talking about. So walking is our primary form of locomoting as humans and on our own without the assistance of an outside machine. There's also something about this cross-lateral movement for me that can stimulate a lot of thinking through things, like the ability to sort of give language to things. So sometimes it feels really important to practice walking with just taking in information through the back of the skull and sensing what is around me, which is a challenge because we like to think. We like to clutter our mind with thoughts. But there's also an active thinking. If I'm contemplating something and working through something and trying to figure out how to give language to it, oftentimes walking helps me with that. So let's just start by walking, ideally on fairly even landscape, depending on where you are, inside or outside, just enough to just feel the swing of the arms walking. And as we're feeling the swing of the arms, just noticing where your feet are touching the ground. And notice how that information from the feet travels upward, up through the legs. And then just notice what the pelvis is doing. So some of us might be very bound while we're walking, and there might not be very much movement in the pelvis. So what happens if I'm moving like this? This is an exaggeration, but so we can bring a little softness, maybe even a bounce into our walk, just to loosen up maybe any holding. And there's a lot of reasons that we might be holding in the pelvis. A lot of reasons. So maybe traumatic experiences that we've had in our life, lived experiences, or maybe something ancestral that we're holding on to, maybe physical impact or injury. So to be kind in our process of witnessing, to be kind to ourselves. And then coming to a pause and standing hip distance apart. So we might have a tendency to stand a little bit wide, which can feel stable, but I'm going to ask you to stand a little bit more narrow, and I don't have quite a, I'll stand like this. So to bring the feet a little bit more narrow so that we're actually standing where our hip socket comes in, which is right here, coming into the acetabulum. It's this ball and joint. There's 6 joints in the pelvis, but I'm going to be talking about the ball and socket here. And this potentially can make a kind of conical movement. This has the most movement of any of the joints in the pelvis. So just feeling into where we're standing. And if we're standing right above, if our pelvis is kind of lined up in this way, we're allowing for the force of movement to move up into the pelvis. So I'll explain what I mean by that. Our femur bone, our thigh bone, has this kind of spiraling external rotation. Our tibia, our shin bone, there's 2 bones here. There's the fibula, but the tibia is what takes most of the weight and the force. Has a kind of, from the knee, maybe a slight spiraling inward, and then there's the complex structure of the feet that's able to support all of the weight of our body. And this downward force, weight in gravity, is moving into the earth. Whatever the material is that we're walking upon, dependent on that. If it's more solid, there's more sort of tone to that, to the surface. It's gonna have a different effect. There's an ant in my belly button. On the information that we're getting into the legs and how we're moving. And so we want to let our pelvis absorb that. We don't want to absorb it into the hip socket. And if we're kind of walking from a wide distance or standing from a wide distance, there's a tendency to take that energy and drive it more into the hip socket, which can have a lot of impact and injury into the cartilage and potential micro tears in the labrum or larger tears in the labrum. So thinking about narrowing our stance a little bit, and then bringing some softness into the knees and just letting ourselves bounce. Let go of any holding pattern that we might have in the sacrum. I have a pretty big anterior tilt, and then I grip around the sacrum, and that is my kind of fight or flight response. That's my pattern. And so I want to let that drop. And then some of us have a kind of tucking pattern here. And conversely, we want to let it drop. I mean, in both cases, we want to let the weight drop so that we can find this, what we might call a neutral pelvis or a neutral spine. So just feeling into the coccyx, the tailbone, dropping down, absorbing the weight, the force up through our absorbers, and then letting go of the bouncing, just bringing a little movement into the tailbone, a little figure 8 pattern. So as if there was a pendulum swinging from the tailbone, we're swinging it in this kind of figure 8 pattern. And then coming to a pause here. And to return to this, what I mentioned before about cross-lateral movement, let's just start by doing some marching here. My mom calls this the cross crawl, and big shout out to my mom, who was born in '49 and grew up in Berkeley and studied dance. When she taught primarily second and third grade, I think, in public schools, she had very large classes, and one of the ways that she would get the learners to focus and drop into their body and into their cognition was to do this cross-crawl movement, which is balancing the hemispheres of the brain. And as we're marching, just allowing our feet to kind of be heavy but land with a kind of a softness, so we're not stomping down. We're just noticing how we're articulating through the feet so that there's not so much impact, because that impact travels up the body. And then allowing yourself to breathe. Bringing breath into the movement also changes the quality, and it changes the ability to perceive. And now, taking a pause here, if you have the possibility of being on an uneven landscape, or you can maybe put some pillows down, we'll just do one little exercise before we walk again. So placing one foot on top of something that's higher than the other foot, and just doing a little bouncing here, and noticing how the body has to accommodate for this. Feeling maybe the upper body in this kind of spiraling weight shift toward the leg that's raised, changing direction, just playing around with how we can move as we've set up our base, our stability, in a maybe less stable way, or a way that we're not accommodated or used, in a structure that we are unused to. And then finding a different setup here and bouncing into that. But I'm focusing on this kind of down up bounce on the standing leg, so maybe the leg that is lower than the other leg. And then noticing how my upper body can respond. What is the adaptability in the body? How can the body take the impact? There's the kind of the resilience of joints. And then coming back to a soft stance here. And then doing a little shaking side to side, or maybe it's not so much shaking, but this little micro rotation. So we're never moving truly on a biaxially or on just one plane. We're triaxial in our movement. Even as we're walking, we're not just walking in this kind of bilateral way. There's all of this spiraling and movement that's coming in. Our hip socket is a circle. So there's all of this movement. And then later in another episode, I'll talk about the other joints of the pelvis, which are very important for our movement, for thinking about our movement and how we transfer weight up and how we support weight from above. So let's just do our last exploration of walking, and maybe now you're going to walk on more of an uneven landscape. And noticing how your body is adapting to that uneven landscape. Maybe you want to do a little leaping, a little rock hopping. And maybe you want to find now more of an even landscape and just feel into the swing of the arms. Bringing the breath all the way down into the pelvis. Since I'm on uneven landscape, my vision is a little bit more down, but maybe try lifting our eyes maybe not so much the head, but the eyes. I think I hear a rattlesnake. Is that a rattle? Yeah, definitely a rattlesnake. They usually don't make sound unless they feel threatened somehow. Or maybe something else that I don't know about. And then just coming back to stillness. Taking a moment to thank your body. For whatever kind of movement is accessible in the body, even if it's mostly on an interior level, at the level of breath, at the level of the blood moving and circulating. And for those that have access to being able to walk in some way, to really not take that for granted. And then thanking the landscape around us, whoever is around us. The beings and entities and containers of intelligence, consciousness. And I thank you for being with me today.